So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm Tlacael, by the way, co-founder of Sunhouse. I guess I should do that first. But yeah, I mean, technical sound issues aside, which, is just to be expected when you're, one person running sound and stage and show and everything all at once. It's tough to jump behind the camera, make sure everything's plugged in. I've experienced it. It's bound to happen. But, besides all that stuff, it was incredible. And every time
I appreciate that.
You sit behind the drums, it's just like an amazing thing to watch. I think we've known each other for a really long time now.
Super long time, yeah.
You were probably my first favorite, Brooklyn indie drummer. I don't know, when did we meet? It probably
I think we met at Zebulon. You were playing with El Topo, which is Dave Harrington's old band, with two drummers, and I was playing with Father Figures. And that, I don't know what year that was, but that was the first time I saw you play.
That was Death by Audio, I think.
Was that Death by Audio? Okay. Anyway,
it might have been.
It's been many years.
Yeah. But
maybe almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember back then you were in 10 bands.
Yeah. Likewise, you were too. I remember we had a South by Southwest once where you played 15 shows or something, and I played 13 shows.
I think it was reversed. I think you were the one who had a show.
We were both dead. Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy. But that was it feels like a different era.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, man, and it's been just an honor and a privilege to see you take Sensory Percussion and make your art with it. And really kind of before we made this, if I had imagined what would be the ideal case for what I would want a drummer to do with it, it was kind of exactly what you ended up doing. I mean, I couldn't imagine the music you would make, but just the level of and depth of control. I mean, I think we had similar trajectories in terms of stuff we listened to, drummers we liked, bands we played with and stuff, and I saw you evolve as a drummer, and so I feel like you influenced me a lot in those early days. And
likewise,
and the expressivity of your playing. I mean, all that stuff is built into Sensory Percussion. So
totally.
that it's yeah. So it's just that's the way you play is part of the reason why sensory percussion exists the way it does. So yeah, man, it's real. So it's just amazing to see the music you make with it.
Thank you.
So yeah, like I guess when we were you studied jazz at NYU, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of your main thing was like jazz music and acoustic drums.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just maybe share a little bit about your trajectory on the instrument and how you ended up here today and like the kinds of stuff you've gone through over your career.
Yeah, so I think the first time I was asked to, I went to jazz school and I studied jazz, but I was always kind of playing a lot of different kinds of music. And I went through a period of time in New York around the time we met where I was saying yes to every gig, which proved to be kind of almost like a boot camp for, like just like learning how to play with different people and different styles, mostly acoustic stuff. But I think in like 2010 or so, or maybe 9, I got this opportunity to play with this band Body Language, which I played with many years. And that was the first time I used an SPDS. That was before the X, the gray guy, where you had to load like I can't remember, like a 1 gigabyte like SSD or something into it. And so that was the first time I kind of toured with using electronics and acoustic drums at the same time. And then from that kind of expanded to using the Roland triggers with the SPDS. And I got pretty deep into that, and it kind of seeped its way into a lot of other projects that I was playing with. And the whole time I'd always been interested in electronic production and stuff, but I never felt like I had a window into it that felt unique to me. And at the time I was really mainly just like developing my, I guess my voice as a player on the drums and the way I incorporated electronics and stuff. And I think I always had these silent kind of frustrations with the SPDS and just sampler pads and how it was very kind of simple, and it's good at sort of doing a simple thing, and a lot of pop music especially does call for that. And I used it a ton, and it was something that I liked using, but at the same time there were things that I wished I think that it could do that it couldn't. And I remember hearing through Sammer, actually, who was the other drummer in El Topo, like he was like, oh, Tlacael's like going to I think you were in grad school at NYU studying music tech or something. And he was like, yeah, he like was learning about machine learning, and he like came up with this like idea of like creating a drum sensor that could actually reflect sort of the nuances of acoustic drum playing and be translatable to an electronic environment. And I remember I probably like hit you up after that being like, hey, like just so you know, like keep me in the loop, because this is exactly what I'm curious about. And so you did keep me in the loop, and I was a beta tester early on. Oh, that's super awesome, by the way, that someone's commenting saying that they saw me with Body Language at South by Southwest years back. That might have been the South by Southwest that Tlacael and I almost destroyed ourselves. But yeah, I was beta testing it, and basically my first EP, Spiritual Leader, was born out of me beta testing this technology. And I still remember at the time the sensors were like 3D printed. They looked really different. And the sampler didn't even exist yet. And I was kind of using it MIDI with Ableton. And that's kind of how I built a majority of the tracks on that EP, kind of stumbling my way into electronic sample-based production in doing so. And I kind of went dove headfirst into it, because the concept behind that EP was that I wasn't going to do anything acoustic whatsoever, but it was also going to be completely performed on Sensory Percussion with no edits or overdubs or anything. And then so that was kind of it was an interesting turning point where like what I developed as my voice as a drummer was able to take a turn and take on a new sort of, there's like this whole new world that it could kind of manifest itself within, which was production. And so that was like 2015 or so. And the past 4 years, I've been like spending so much time like learning about production and sound design and stuff, and doing a lot of remixes in between the EP and the album to kind of like test out different ideas and things like that. And then with this album, I took a much more layered approach. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but
no, it's good.
Yeah.
I'm curious. You know, I think you were the first person who I saw like playing Sensory Percussion live, like, a full set, and like that experience of hearing electronic music, but every note is played, and it's this like a very different way of hearing what you normally associate with kind of more automated processes, loops, sequencers, and stuff. And that was a really kind of interesting kind of turning point, I think, in the way that, you know, certainly in the history of our company, and like seeing what you could do with it on stage and stuff. And of course, the music video for Spiritual Leader, I remember you were very adamant about that being, so the video shoot for the song, for the video, that performance ended up being on the album. That it was not like I'm redoing it to kind of match what I was doing, but like that performance was just the song on the record. Which
there's no way I can redo any performance of Spiritual Leader because it's so free. It's almost like a weird free drum solo. And I remember actually recently someone hit me up asking if I had sheet music for that. Which I obviously don't. But yeah, that was sort of like, I feel like in order to really tap into what I felt like I could do with the technology, and the technology is always growing, by the way, and I'm always like, oh, this new feature, like that new feature. At the time, I set pretty harsh limitations on how I made it. But that wasn't the case with this album, which I was less sort of, I took a much more layered approach, basically, and in addition to using sensory percussion, I was using like regular MIDI keyboards and other sound design stuff, and rather than like trying to do a whole take like on the entire kit, maybe I'd like do one take with like just like a hi-hat pattern or something, and then like add the next layer. So it was less kind of confined in a way to my playing and more compositional in a way. So when it came time to figuring out how to play this album live, it was a real head scratcher. But it's been fun, and it's still a work in progress, I would say. So
I guess I have two questions. One that just came up, but the other, well, so I guess the first one is, you know, the SPD. Is that where that comes in for you then?
Yeah, the SPD and the MIDI controller to my left, which you can see the setup here. Those things I added to the station just so, you know, the SPD, a big part of its role is switching kits. I use it as a way to switch between sensory percussion kits, but also just to fire off more kind of less expressive and more just like, that's the sound, that's the volume, like kind of samples. And I, you know, I'm doing things on a grid to a form for most of these songs. So there's like automation with some of the sounds as it goes through. So I'll be playing something on the SPDS, but also I'm using the SPDS and the MIDI controller to do some live looping now.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, which I think the first half of the last song you couldn't hear the audio. Is that correct?
I think that was the case, yeah.
Okay, I think that was the case. Well, that was where you would have heard the live looping, like in action.
We could hear some stuff, but it was just drums. I think it was missing whatever you played on the keyboard at first.
Oh, yeah. So all that stuff was not there.
Yeah.
Damn.
But it's still kind of cool. So
anyway, yeah. So that was what that was. So yeah, I was getting into live looping using Ableton's plugin for looping, which has been fun and scary. I actually like made a little mistake in my live loop on that last performance, and can't necessarily tell, but it's one of those things where it loops and you live with it. So yeah,
it's kind of interesting what electronics has done for live performance. Like in one way, so if used in a certain way, it takes away all the risk, right?
Yeah.
You could be playing to a lip syncing to a pre-recorded track, which is done in places. And the idea there is remove all risk because the stakes are too high. I don't know why music should be viewed that way. Personally, I don't know. But the other is that if you want to incorporate it live, the stakes, the things that could go wrong end up being much more severe. And so it's like, it's interesting. Like, I guess, how do you navigate that of like, you know, if you're just playing the drums, we've had this experience where you break a stick or you actually break your drum head or your cymbal flies off. You still have options. It doesn't stop the show. In fact, if like the power cuts out, the drummer is the only one that can really keep going, right? Often.
Right, yeah.
So like that, it's kind of a new territory for us, I feel like, if you're coming from acoustic drums. So like, I guess, any thoughts on like the benefits or the process of like becoming to trust the a new way of approaching live performance in music when it comes to risk and that idea?
I mean, I think it depends on who you are, but for me, like, I love having freedom when I'm playing to some extent, and also I love improvising, and I don't know, I think that risk can serve as like a life force behind a live performance in some way. Oh, by the way, I'm just noting the comment about the Bink looper. I will check that out. But yeah, I think it's something that I've just had to embrace. You know, I think that sometimes like you said, when the stakes are higher, for example, if I was like a drummer in like, for like a huge pop act doing like an arena tour or something, I would probably set things up so that stuff is pretty damn reliable, you know? But that's the beauty of sensory percussion, is that it's so customizable in terms of how it's set up, that you can make it as like easy to control and as you want, and you can also make it as like kind of complex and risky as you want. So it's kind of choose your own adventure. So, you know, even with Sunlux, which I do use sensory percussion, the show like doesn't ride on it. There's other things in the Sunlux setup that are risky, but you know, electronics and stuff is always scary. But I kind of set things up for the environment I'm playing in, I guess. But for the solo stuff, it's very risky because I'm doing everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just as you saw happen, like things can go wrong. But I kind of love that in a way, because, you know, I could have like done like a pre-recorded video, like nudged all my notes to like sound perfect and then like sent it off. But like right now, when we can't be in live performance and live spaces right now, it's like the closest thing to seeing it is these platforms, which in my opinion have a long way to go, but they do still have like this palpable kind of risk factor. I think the last thing I'll say about risk is that like, and these are not my words, I think maybe Wadada Leo Smith said this or something about, and he's a jazz musician, so it makes sense, but he was saying that, you know, no one goes to see The Lion Tamer unless there's like a small possibility that the tamer is going to get eaten, you know? Yeah. There's something exciting about it, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess when it comes to specifically to your solo music, you mentioned that like Spiritual Leader, for example, is basically a drum solo and it's totally open and free, and if you stop playing, nothing happens, right? Yeah. Whereas you have other songs that are a little bit more, not through composed, but like planned in a way.
For sure, yeah.
So how is that like a binary for you between those, or how do you navigate between like what is going to be totally open and free, how much freedom you build into each song?
It's not a binary. I think both can exist within the same song. For example, the second to last thing that I played, where the SPDS crapped out and like the upright bass sample like stopped working, that song actually is pretty much like mapped out up until like a certain point at the end, and then like everything like kind of opens up, and it was kind of perfect, like what that like crapped out when it did, because the way the song ends, it doesn't really need it. So I think inserting pockets into what I'm doing that's less structured, because a lot of the new material is a lot more structured, can be really fun and exciting and makes every performance totally different.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what I wanted to do, was like stretch out sort of the songs live in some way that were different than the recording, and create greater pockets of freedom than it would be if I just like played it down. Yeah.
Could you show us a little bit on your kit, like what some of these elements look like, and how they
Totally.
like some of the moving parts?
Totally. Let's see. So the last one I played, since it's freshest in everyone's memory. Let me just make sure I'm sending to my monitors now. Okay.
That's a nice drum key.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so everyone can hear that, right?
Yeah.
So this is, for those of you who know what's happening in sensory percussion, I'll show you the floor tom. There's 2 samplers, each have a number of cycled alto flute samples. But to create some chaos, a lot of times when people do sampling sessions, they'll play like a note more than once. So I just left the second note in, and they always happen at like completely different, somewhat different random times, as you can see. And then
that second note's built into the sample. I see.
The second note is built into the sample, and it was just like the flute player like giving another sample option, but I was like, I'm gonna leave it in so it creates like a little bit more wilderness. And then these claps I have on, there's like on the center there's certain claps, and then on the edge there's sort of like higher pitched claps. And so the amalgamation of that, when I play it on the floor tom,
that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you have a center and edge zone, and those have 2 different claps on them?
Yeah, the edge zone is a higher, it's pretty subtle, but it's a higher clap. And the reason why I have like a million claps cycling is just it's something that I really like to do. It's pretty subtle, but it just creates like this richness where, like, you know, even if it's the same sample and there's a different velocity and maybe you map it to something, there's like something different about like each clap being like a slightly different character that feels more real to me, I guess, or it's just richer, I guess, like texturally. But the flutes, obviously there's a cycle for the notes, but the claps, the cycle is just to create like a more of a lively sounding instrument, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, when you play an acoustic drum, every time you hit it, you get a slightly different sound. So you're kind of amplifying that concept, but in a random way, and kind of creating more. You're avoiding that like digital, like same sound kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's and sometimes I'll like, you know, with some lucks I'll like load in 5 snare samples that go on my snare, and they like almost sound identical, and it's probably just one of those things that like doesn't matter at all, but like to me, I'm like, yeah, this makes this better.
Yeah. The subtle differences really, I feel like that's where all the vibe comes from. Like all those little subtle things you build into the create that texture and that kind of emotional feeling around sounds. But yeah,
totally. And I think like, you know, Bink Beats is saying don't hate, automate here, which I like. To me, and there's plenty of automation happening in my new songs now. Just FYI, I'm not a purist about like how I go about playing these songs. It's just, I feel like there's so many tools at our disposal and so many different options. For me, the most important thing that I've had to kind of realize is that like whether or not I choose to do something a certain way, like just has to be informed by like basically if it's going to make the performance better or not, you know? And I think like, for example, one situation where like, where it's good to automate, in my opinion, is like or not to automate, like, let's say like, I don't know, there's just like certain types of things that like, if I gave myself like way too much to do, you know, it would basically turn into like a game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Where I'm trying to play this composition, but like I'm so stressed out and I like can't really have fun, and maybe it's challenging, but maybe it's like too challenging and I can't really like do it and like feel expressive at the same time. It's just about like finding a balance where like I'm giving myself enough of a challenge that's fun and also like is expressive, and the instrument is expressive and I can control like the way it sounds. But at the same time, there's like maybe some things happening in the background. For example, with the live looping, I'll like have it automated where it like loops and where it stops and maybe where it comes back again and stuff like that. I'm not trying to like hit some button that tells it the loop to stop and then hit a button to tell the loop to start again, because like that doesn't add anything to the performance, in my opinion, unless it's like a really open thing where like I'm choosing when to do it. But if it's going to happen at that time anyway, I might as well have it automated. That's my view. But yeah, I could talk forever about that.
It's not, you don't want the use of the technology to be a performative thing in and of itself. It's
no,
more
and if there's,
because the music is what's important.
Totally. And if there's no audio visual connection, let's say I'm like hitting something that's just like switching some setting that I could otherwise automate, it's like, why wouldn't I automate it? You know what I mean? Like it's the cool thing about setting up like an electronic environment for a live performance is that you write the rules, you know? And in my opinion, it's like best to not shut yourself off from anything. That's me personally. And I like completely would 100% back someone who like feels differently about it and thinks differently and like kind of that's their thing. But that's just like the way I approach it. It's like a more, because actually when I did Spiritual Leader, the way I was thinking was very rigid, and that was kind of a way towards like a certain type of creativity. And then now I've kind of like diversified a bit.
Well, yeah. It can be helpful to have a lens, to have a really kind of
that's a good way to
a way of angle to look at something, because otherwise, how do you know where to start or what to do, or you know, sometimes you just need to like to give yourself rules to abide by in order to like find a path.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And Bink Beats, I'm not trying to start any beef. I love you. You're amazing. We've met in person. He's super fucking nice. And I'm sorry if I misunderstood your comment.
So speaking of automation and not automating, do you have any kits that have like interesting controller operations on them, like you know, like timbre controllers, or that have kind of movement between zones?
Yeah.
I'm curious how you combine like that level of expressivity in the sample control with like these more kind of, you know, less, I guess, responsive or expressive elements.
Trying to think of one that. Okay, so here's a song that's like very, very free, and it's only a minute on the record, but I usually play it longer when I play it live. No Bink beef. That's hilarious. It's called Swarm. And it's a pretty complex sensory percussion kit. It doesn't involve Ableton at all. There's a lot of sample cycling, as well as like, here, I'll show you real quick. Like there's like a different dynamic range for each sampler. So this is when I hit hard. It's like one of these samples, and it's going through a quantized pitch sort of situation from center to edge. And here's the middle dynamic. And here's the soft dynamic hits. And these are all samples of snare off, snare hits with mallets, some with sticks, and different mic images just to make it richer, like kind of cycling through.
What so, yeah.
I'm going to turn down. That is loud. So when I hit harder, it's like a different sampler basically, or you know what I mean, like a different. And then on the rack tom, I have a verb that's mapped to the entire kit, set mapped to velocity.
Oh, nice.
That's a brief rundown of that one.
Nice.
Yeah, and each drum is basically set up the same way, but it's a different note range. So it kind of goes floor tom's lower, snare's a little higher, and then the rack tom's highest, and the kick is just one note.
Do you?
To answer the question, would it be possible to perform without a computer on stage with you? Yes, but I'll just be playing acoustic drums, and I have done solo acoustic drum performances in the past. They're challenging. And I don't think I've ever done one longer than like 30 minutes, but I have thought about this before in a scenario where like all the tech goes to shit. If there's just like a couple drums lying around, like I can at least give people somewhat of a show. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you want to? Somebody asked if you. I don't want to like make you show too much, but if there's a song where you could like play a little bit of it and kind of so we could get a sense of how some of the moving parts work with each other, would that be too difficult?
Yeah, I can play a little bit. I can play like a little bit of the song that the last song that I played, and kind of walk through it a bit. So
the closer the iPhone is to the speakers, the better, but I know
okay. Yeah.
There's a space constraint there.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, but so this song starts out with me creating like a bass loop on the keyboard. I map the bass notes. Now that's looping, right? And then I move over here. Ooh, wrong kit. Yeah. And I kind of start creating this flute texture.
All right.
We're back.
I did not know about that 1 hour limit.
Oh, you didn't know about it? Yeah, that's a thing. Just another thing. But I guess I'll just restart what I was doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were just getting into it.
It was like just getting into it. It was such a tease. So yeah, I'll do that again. So this one's called Comfort Me. And it starts with the bass loop. Flutes on the rack tom. And then the guitars start filtering in that I play on the SPDS. And that becomes a loop at some point.
Can you hold the phone to the speaker for a second so we can kind of hear that a little closer? Nice. And then what do you have on the snare drum?
Woo! Anyway, that gives kind of an idea. It gets a little difficult with one hand to kind of navigate.
Yeah, I'm sure. Sorry, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's that one gets tricky from there on up. But like you could kind of see like some of the different things that I'm working with. You know, live looping, and then you heard some automation happening on the guitar, which got kind of crazy at times, and then the cycles of flutes and claps on the heads of the drum, and then just a snare sound on like the snare rim, kick sound on the kick. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. That's really cool. The live looping stuff and then playing. I like it because it's like the live looping allows you to create these kind of textures, but you still control the drums, so you can like, you know, it's like creating a kind of texture to play along to, and yeah, it's cool.
Totally.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Someone just asked about if Audacious Melody cycles samples or if I'm doing it some other way. This is the thing that I do on Romeo and Inhaler as well from the EP that is something that you know how I do it, Tlacael.
Oh.
But a lot of people don't know how I'm doing it, and I don't know if I should tell everyone. Or not.
I don't think just you know, it's a thing. It's you don't have to say anything.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no.
Yeah, it's basically a version of like automation, but kind of in a specific way, I guess. It's not really automation, but it kind of is. I don't know. Here's a mystery for you to figure out. It's like two people playing one saxophone, and I'm the mouthpiece.
That's a good analogy. That's cool. Someone just asked about your light show, which is a good question.
Yeah. And Soft Talk, to answer your question, I don't know if Mason Self Mason Self knows how to do everything with sensory percussion, but I don't know if he's done the thing that I'm talking about. I'm not sure. He might have. But anyway, the light show is something that I have to say that I didn't do completely myself. I'm not super like proficient with DMXs, but basically the way that's working is that like I'm sending MIDI notes that are unique coming from Sensory Percussion, going to a separate laptop that just has a session of Ableton session with DMX's VSTs in there, and basically different MIDI notes fire off different light commands. And so in a lot of cases, it's just an envelope that matches the sound and color and whatnot. But in some cases, it might be firing off like a program that, you know, it might like kind of pan left to right or like, you know, do stuff like that. And the other thing that I've been able to do is map the CCs for velocity. And you can map CCs for anything to like the brightness as well. So that kind of gives it a greater depth.
So to be clear, you're going from sensory controller mapped to a CC output, and then that's going to a DMX box, more or less.
More or less, yeah. And I have not used the envelope function for lights yet, just because of the way I had everything set up, it made more sense to just go through Ableton.
Yeah, we came out with that, I think, after you had already like fully designed that set.
Yeah. Yes, and shout out to Endless, Adam and Sarah for helping me with the lights. It's lighting can be so confusing, and the programming behind it, and like when things don't work, like it can be such a mystery. So working with them has been completely necessary for me.
So I just want to announce real quick the winner for the LP.
Oh, we all. Yeah.
Jody Lee Oliver.
Jody nice. Lee
Oliver. So
Lee
there
Oliver.
you go. It is done.
Congrats.
So I guess a DM will happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess, just more generally, life-wise, current, dealing with the current situation, what's your experience been? And like, how are you, like, you're not on tour, obviously.
Yeah.
That's usually what musicians have to do now to like,
Make money.
like being a musician turned into just touring all the time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
you got your way out of that.
yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm lucky in that I kind of, well, I guess the first thing that happened is I lost a ton of touring. I was supposed to tour most of the year with playing drums for Moses Sumney, as well as doing some solo touring and some Sunhouse touring. But that's all not happening this year, which is tough. But I'm lucky that I have some projects lined up that is going to continue to kind of pay the rent. I'm working on a new splice pack right now using Sensory Percussion and Serum exclusively. So using Sensory Percussion to control Serum, and it's actually very seamless. It's pretty easy to do that. And then working on a film score with Sunlux. So I've been kept pretty busy at home. I'm also working on a few remixes, and yeah, it's been, to be completely honest, it's been, I miss performing and I miss playing with people, but at the same time, like, I've been on the road a majority of the time for the past 9 years, I think, and it's been really nice to be home for a while. I mean, I love traveling and touring and stuff, but it's like, I don't know. I live with my partner Isabella, and like, it can be hard. So it's been really nice to be home and kind of, it's the first time I've been home for months consecutively in the last 9 years. So it's been good to kind of slow down, and I'm very lucky that I have other income coming in from creative things, because I know a lot of people aren't in that position. So it's been good. Yeah.
That's great. So on the last stream, we got asked, do you have any advice for like home studio setup, or how you work and write and record at home?
Yeah, it's always a work in progress. My home studio is actually pretty modest. I have a pair of Rocket KRKs, an interface, a powerful computer, which is probably the most important thing that anyone needs for a home studio. And I just got it recently. Up until then, I was using a 2014 laptop, which was powerful too, but it was starting to get mad at me for doing very simple things. And then I have my Sensory Percussion set up here. I have an acoustic kit set up here, which I don't really have the means to record acoustically very well at the moment. I mean, the next thing that I need to figure out is soundproofing. But I invested in a pair of really nice headphones. I mean, honestly, you really don't need much to have the ability to create crazy stuff now. And a lot of the work that I was doing, even on the record and remixes, was done remotely when I was on tour. Like, I would work on plane rides all the time, on long van rides, and my time at home when I was like recording would usually just to be like record whatever I can on Sensory Percussion, and then I'd like kind of piece things together like while on tour sometimes. Someone asked recently in the feed if I use Sensory Percussion for remixes, and the answer is yes, to varying degrees. Sometimes it's like almost all Sensory Percussion, and sometimes Sensory Percussion is like one of many elements happening. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm a big like, I feel very strongly about like, work with what you have and really learn the tools that you have at your disposal before upgrading. But obviously the basics of having some sort of good monitoring, for me right now, the best monitoring is headphones. And then, having a decent computer definitely helps a lot, but honestly, you don't need much. Yeah. I have like 2 microphones, no mic stands, you want to see how I had my Omni mic set up for the live stream to talk, it's like that. So.
Oh yeah, nice. Painter's tape works.
Yeah. So
is that a hi-hat stand? You had the mic
stand,
tape for
yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess I don't know, any other things you want to say or shout out? Do you have more streams coming up, or any projects that are?
Don't have any streams coming up right now. Shout out the Moses Sumney record, which I was fortunate enough to play on. Just came out in full today. Like part 1 came out a few months ago. But otherwise, yeah.
What about your record?
Oh, I'll shout out my record. Yeah, sure. I put out a record called Belonging on April 24th, and the vinyl will be arriving late May. That's when Jody, the winner of our draw, will get his. Yeah, I worked really fucking hard on it, and I'm really proud of it. So check it out if you like anything about what I do. And hope you enjoy it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, man.
Isabella's more on it than I am. I have a new music video coming out next week. That's right.
Oh, that's a big one.
And it's very cool. I'm very excited about it. Yeah.
Where's that gonna show up?
Internet. I don't know what the premiere situation is yet. But you know, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see it there for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, just thanks for showing up on our channel. This is like a Sensory Streams series that we're starting. So
yeah, there's gonna be more.
Yeah, we're gonna have more, and yeah, we're gonna also figure out how to get that video back up and posted, at least the parts where sound wasn't dropped out.
Thank you.
So we'll see.
That.
We'll work it out. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you all. Thanks.
All right. See ya.
Peace.